Thanks for joining me for another edition of Grew with Portia. I'm your host, Portia Booker, and yes, this is my real name. Grew with Portia targets those who are curious, eager, and hungry for new information that can aid in their personal and professional development. Malcolm X once said, "Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today." Never stop learning. Be a sponge for the rest of your life. So before I jump into my history lesson today, I want to introduce my guest in the studio. Welcome, Captain Courtney Schoch. Welcome.
Shoch.
Shoch. Oh, like a shock factor.
Like an electric shock, yes.
Electric shock. Well, welcome, Captain Courtney Schoch.
Thank you, Portia. It's so fantastic to be here.
I'm glad. It's so funny how I got to meet you. You know, I tell people all the time, my luck charm is social media. That's how I landed my first TV job, was on social media.
Really?
So, little story. I was on Facebook, and my alma mater, Kent State University, shout out to the Golden Flashes. I was on their TV2 alumni page, and TV2 is their TV station there inside of Franklin Hall, where they do all their live newscasts and stuff. So I was on there just scrolling one day because alumni post jobs and some people post internships, whatever. I'm scrolling through and I said, oh, this station is looking for producers, reporters, digital content people. So I'm looking at it and I see where it's located. I said, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Isn't that where people still sleep in teepees and, you know, people are riding horses everywhere? What is it, Tulsa? Isn't there tumbleweed going down the street? Of course, my narrow mind. So, you know, I scrolled past it and then I'm just like, whatever. So I came back to it maybe a week later and I just said, you know what, let me just apply. I remember it was on a Thursday too because I was off that day. So I, you know, sent in my resume and sure enough, I got a phone call in an hour after I applied. An hour.
Wow.
And the lady, I'll never forget, she's like, hi, this is the executive producer from, I will not say the station name, but in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I got your resume and I wanted to ask you a couple questions. Do you have them? And I'm like, yes, even though I'm thinking, whoa, did this really just happen? I mean, I did the little phone screening with her. A week later, I did the Skype interview with her boss. Then I want to say maybe 2 weeks went by, and they asked me to come down for an in-person interview. So they paid for my flight. They paid for my hotel. I went to the station itself. I sat with some of their staff that day. I sat with a producer. I went out with a reporter. I mean, everything. It sounds like a dream, but it wasn't. I still have the plane ticket to prove it.
Was it stressful?
It was. I mean, it was very overwhelming because it happened so fast. I mean, literally within a month. And I graduated that year in 2016 from Kent, August 20th. And they offered me the job the week after.
Wow.
So I packed all my stuff, left on October the 7th, and I started my new job October 10th.
Wow. Were you amazed that there weren't tumbleweeds everywhere?
I was. I saw the Arkansas River. What else did I see? A lot of jacked up streets. Like, you think our streets out there are bad in Cleveland, but theirs, it's like, you know how you ride a bike and you go down steps? It's like, that's literally how it is in some parts. The weather's decent. I think the first year that I lived there, we got like a light feather dusting of snow, but for the most part, it's not that bad.
I wonder why their streets are so bad then. Because here it's due to the salts and
Right.
the corrosion. I wonder.
I think they get really bad ice. But the 2 years I was there, they didn't get a lot of ice. So I was very fortunate. But people looking at me like I was crazy because I'm going 50 down the street and there's snow everywhere. I'm like, well, I have all weather tires and I have an SUV. Get out of my way. Like, but yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, Facebook and LinkedIn are my luck charms.
Yep, and that's how we connected on
Yes.
LinkedIn. Yes. I was very excited to hear from you.
I know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I ain't about to get nowhere with this. This is a long shot idea that I've thought of. So, back to kind of where we originally started. This is episode 2 of my Women in History Month tribute. So Courtney here is a pilot. Like I said in my first episode, I wanted to focus on women who are in male-dominant occupations. I wanted to, give them a highlight. We make up the world too. And just because they say that we can't, we can.
Absolutely.
So,
Right on.
I'm glad to have you, Courtney.
I'm excited to be here.
I know. So let's, kind of dive in. How did you become a pilot?
So a lot of pilots you'll speak with, they'll say, oh, I always dreamed of being a pilot. And I actually had a terrible fear of being a pilot and stumbled into it. I was flipping through an entertainment book. Remember the entertainment book? I was married with 2 young children. I was about 26 years old and looking for a little bit of excitement. Felt like I could grow, do something different. Came across a coupon in the entertainment book for a $50 introductory flight at Burke Lakefront Airport here in Cleveland.
What?
Took the flight, and just so I could check the box off and feel like a badass. Like I went up in a tiny plane and absolutely loved it. Came home super excited about it. Told my husband at the time, like, hey, I just want to get my private pilot's license, just do something on the side. We didn't have a lot of money, and he wasn't very supportive, but I still pursued it and ended up keeping the flying, losing the husband.
Oh.
And that's a whole nother story, but that's how I came into it. And it was just fascinating. I became a flight instructor, and then I flew corporate jets, and then I went to the airlines.
So wait a minute. You found this in a coupon book.
I did.
And so let's talk about this. So you get to the airport. You present this coupon. They probably have you sign some type of waiver. I mean, once you got into the plane, so you were in the driver's seat from...
I was in the driver's seat, but the exciting part was that there was a female who was the flight instructor. And,
wow.
Yeah, and her name was Michelle. And I was tickled. I thought, oh, this is pretty cool, because you have that connection, right? And I was petrified. I was scared to death. Anytime I got in an airplane, like a big airplane, I don't know if they still have them now at the airports, but I used to be the double for $1 or whatever. Like I'd have to have a couple drinks before I got on an airplane as a passenger. And here I know it sounds crazy, but it was such a fear of mine that I really just wanted to look it head on and just say, okay, I did this. And I just fell in love with it.
Wow. So let's talk about that. So you get in there, you're sitting in the driver's seat. I'm sure there's a whole slew of buttons and checks you have to do, right? So, I mean, how did you feel the minute that the plane started going and you're about to take off in the air? I mean, was Michelle kind of like coaching you through
So
it?
she takes off. So in these first introductory flights, the flight instructor, because there's 2 yokes, so you both have controls. But being new and my first time up, I just sat there with my hands in my lap and my feet back so I didn't touch the rudder pedals. It's the don't touch anything.
Okay.
And then once we got up to level flight along the lake shore here, like at Lake Erie, kind of like going east towards like Lost Nation, Willoughby area, is the point that she says, okay, now I'm going to give you the controls, but don't pull back or push forward, just take the controls. So up until that point, I was pretty friggin' terrified. Thought I was going to pee my pants, to be honest with you.
So was it a small kind of like Cessna
Small.
plane?
It was a 4-seater plane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a Cessna 172.
Wow. I mean, so you felt it going like left and right in the air. You know, I remember, you know, Kent State has their aeronautics program. And they have what's called their Heritage Festival. I don't know if they still do it. Normally it's around September every year. Me and my sister went. I want to say my junior year at Kent State. And their aeronautics students needed their hours of, you know, service. So you could pay to be on one of their flights with them. So I told my sister, I'm like, come on, Carla, let's go do it. My sister was like, I said, come on, it'd be fun. Of course, I'm the adventurous one. So, you know, I convinced her to get on. So we get in, you know, the pilot's nice young man, you know, probably around the same age as me at the time, around like 21, 22. And he's doing all the checks and everything. And so I just remember when it took off, I just felt it going, woo, woo, left and right. But I mean, the view that we got of Kent, you know, the downtown area, the Esplanade, you know, over the campus. I mean, it was so fun and so cool. And to think like, I'm in this tiny little plane. It's like, how is this even flying and not like blowing away? That's literally what I was thinking the whole time. My sister was probably, her hair was probably ready to just fall out by how nervous she was. But just the experience was fun. Like, I've ridden in, you know, commercial planes. I've ridden in helicopters. So it's just fun. Yeah. And they're all different when you ride it.
They are. Yeah, the helicopter's a lot of fun. How did you feel about that?
So that experience, me and my friend went to New York City in 2015. We had bought a deal on Groupon for the helicopter flight. Because, you know, you can buy them and you can get like a 15-minute tour. So that's how we found it. It was a deal for like $150 for 2 people. You couldn't beat that with a stick. So we get there, you know, they tell us the rules and regulations, all that, right? So they put us in the helicopter because I think it was 2, 4, maybe it was like a 6-person helicopter. Me and my friend were in the back, and then there was this one young lady who sat up front with the pilot.
Did you have the doors open, like off, or you had them closed?
Closed.
Okay.
I mean, because it's loud in there. So we had like the headphones on, and then we could talk to each other and stuff. It was interesting. I didn't like when the helicopter turns because you feel everything. I mean, I was like, ooh. I'm like, talk about brain freeze, but nothing cold. I mean, yeah, I mean, the cool thing, what I really liked, we went over downtown New York City. So we went over Ground Zero. We went over the Statue of Liberty. We went over Ellis Island. I mean, just beautiful. I enjoyed it. It was a nice, bright day, so you could see everything. Like I said, it was about 15 minutes. That was long enough.
Yeah, I bet.
Because when I got off, I swear my legs just went, just turned right to jello. Because, don't get me wrong, I have my fear of stuff, but I don't let it show. Yeah. I don't let it show. I don't want people to know, like, oh, she's afraid. No, I'm not. You don't see anything. But it was a good time. I really enjoyed it. That was probably one of my favorite things we did in New York City.
That's cool.
Was a helicopter tour.
Have you done skydiving or anything like that?
My friend has, but I have not. And I still kind of want to do it just to check it off my bucket list. So, hopefully, we'll get there.
You'll do it.
Not bungee jumping, though. No bungee.
Yeah, I wonder why bungee jumping seems more horrifying than skydiving.
I guess because bungee jumping, people expect the rope to snap. Versus when you're skydiving, you would expect the parachute to not come out. So that's probably my take on it. I'm good on the bungee jumping. I'm good on that.
Yeah, I agree. Bridge jumping and all that stuff.
I've done zip lining. Zip lining is fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was funny. I took my sister zip lining, and she loves Cedar Point. I don't like Cedar Point because the rides hurt my back. So I don't get on any roller coasters or none of that anymore. Well, she's standing there, oh, I'm scared. What do you mean you scared? If you can get on the dragster and the Millennium Force, you can't jump across here. So, of course, I'm wrong for this, but I don't care. I said, Carla, look over there.
Oh, wow.
She's like, Portia! I mean, but it's like, she had fun anyway, but it's like, you gotta go. Just be quiet and go.
Get outside your head and just do more action and less thinking.
Yes. So, forgive me for doing that, but she was fine. I mean, she was fine. She just coasted across. No big deal.
At the end of it, was she like, what the heck did you do, Portia? I can't believe you pushed me.
I think she hit me a couple times. Okay. So, but I deserved it. I deserved it. Like I said in the beginning, this is my series dedicated to Women's History Month. I'm focused on women who are dominating in male-driven fields. So, Courtney, let's kind of dive in. What are the requirements to be a pilot? Like, I know you have to get some type of licensure, but, how many hours do you have to complete to get your pilot's license and different things like that? Is there a written test?
Oh, yeah, there's a whole range of things that you do. So we won't dive too deep into it. But, for instance, your first license or certification would be your private. Then it goes into instrument, which means you can fly in clouds. And then your commercial, which means you can be paid to do something like taking aerial photos. And you can go a whole bunch of different routes, from flight instructor to corporate to airlines. So the very first thing that you do is you get your private pilot's license. And there's also recreational pilot's licenses now. There's all kinds of stuff. So it just depends on what you want to do with it. It would probably take up the whole show with that. But going the private pilot route, it's typically you have a flight instructor, you fly, and after about 10 hours, you solo, and you fly by yourself, and you still do a lot of work with your flight instructor, but you start working on the maneuvers that you need to do to pass the test with the FAA. And there is also a written test as well, and an oral test with the FAA. So most students, I'd say, get their private pilots rating about 60 to 70 hours on national average. Yeah. So it's not too bad. Not too bad right now. There's a pilot shortage, so we're trying to get a whole bunch of pilots in the pipe here so they can go on to the airlines. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of reasons for the pilot shortage. So there's there's a lot of pilots retiring. There's age 65 is the mandatory pilot retirement age for airlines.
Really?
Yep. So we're coming up to that right now.
Interesting. I would have never have known that. I've never heard that for like any job. That's like, it's mandatory that you have to retire by this age. But at the same time, it does make sense. Mm-hmm.
Well, an airline, and I'm only speaking about airlines now. Airline pilots are required to get a medical, and pretty much all pilots, but speaking about the airline industry, it's a first class medical, which depending on our age, you either go every 6 months or every year.
Wow.
And so I don't really know what the thought process is behind it, but pilots for the most part, to keep themselves pretty healthy because that's our livelihood. Right. And the powers that be just say 65 is the age that you really shouldn't be flying, but you could go fly like corporate jets or something, or still flight instruct. There is talk that Congress wants to expand the age requirement or extend it to 70 just because of the pilot shortage.
It's possible. I mean, that's interesting. I would have never thought I would have heard that there's a pilot shortage. Now, you often hear in the medical profession that there's either, a doctor shortage or a nursing shortage, but I guess I would never think pilot. In my mind, if I wasn't sitting here talking to you and I heard that from somebody, I would think a lot of people are afraid. I mean,
well, there's a whole bunch of factors that feed into it, but besides the mandatory retirement age and the fact that, let's say, a decade or so ago, at least when I got hired with the airlines in 2008, the pay wasn't there. So I was at the regional and I was over 6 figures in student loan debt to get my pilot's license, like all the ratings that I needed to qualify. And I started out making $18,000 a year. which,
Whoa.
yes. And I was a single mom with 2 children as a first officer, which is like the co-pilot, as a lot of people think. And I was on welfare as an airline captain or an airline pilot, making $18,000 a year. And so that,
Wow.
people say, well, going this far into debt for this type of job, there's not a lot of return until much later when you fly bigger equipment or whatever it looks like. That was the mindset. Now it's much different because regional airlines are really trying to entice new pilots with sign-on bonuses and paying for some of their training. And there's a whole bunch of different programs out there now. So it looks very different, but it may be just a little too late because we're already seeing this shortage creep up. There's already certain flights that are being canceled just because there's not pilots to fly them, on the regional side of the house.
Wow. And that's, it's sad because, people love to travel, people love going places, and, that's our way of life now. It's not like, planes aren't going anywhere anytime soon, They're not going to become extinct just one day. There's going to continue to be international travel, and even just for quick, shortish distance time, I'm not going to sit up here if I have to get to Colorado at the end of the week. I don't think I'm going to, waste, renting a car, depending on how much time you have, when flight can get you there in 4 hours, 4 hours?
About 3. Yeah. There's definitely the demand. It's just finding the pilots to fill that demand.
Wow. Well, I hope that, there's some people who are listening to this that definitely take heed to that. Courtney, you said it, the pilot, if you're trying to get your private pilot license, can you get it at Burke here, or?
There's tons of places.
Okay.
So you can get it. Right now, I work as a consultant for a school in Akron called American Winds, which you can also get your associate's degree. Then also at Burke Lakefront, there's smaller schools. There's so many different paths that you can take. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go the college route. I didn't go the college route. You didn't go to flight school at an academy, or I just did a very simple basic school at Burke Lakefront. There's just tons and tons of opportunities out there.
That's good.
Yeah, maybe we can, I can link something to my website or online, give you something. So give a reference if anyone's interested.
Yeah, so definitely if one of our listeners was, interested in maybe, kind of getting their feet wet, maybe they've thought about it and weren't really sure, or, not really knowing that this is available here in Cleveland.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a ton, like women, right? Since we're talking about women, there's Women in Aviation, which offers so many scholarships. A lot of the schools offer scholarships to women, to just all different, all across the board. And you just have to do some digging. Yeah. I didn't realize this when I first started out. I was clueless. I wish I had someone to have guided me. But that's live and learn. So if anybody needs any assistance or any references, I'm sure we can get the information out to them.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I love to do is, have people on here that can help our community. I'm big on giving back and just empower them. Let them know that this idea that you're thinking of, it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, if I could say this too, I'm not sure like in terms of how far into my background we're gonna get, but just to throw it out there, I mean, I dropped out of high school. So I was a high school dropout.
Wow.
I was a stripper to make money, to make ends meet. Like I did all kinds of things before I became a pilot, and I thought that I was never going to be good enough or smart enough, and this was not the path. And after going back to school and eventually getting my master's degree and stuff like that, which is not required to get a pilot's license, but that's just the path that I took. I was definitely the underdog, and I'm always a big advocate for the underdog, that like we place these ridiculous limitations on ourselves, and it's just a story. That's all it is that we tell ourselves. So change your story, change your life.
Well, change your perspective. I'm a firm believer. It's all about perspective and, really taking a look at yourself And sometimes that's hard to do. That's not easy to literally examine yourself and question yourself. What am I doing? Mm-hmm. You know, it's not always, well, because of her I couldn't do this, because of him I couldn't do it. Sometimes it's you.
Well, often it's you, right?
Yeah.
It's the asking better questions instead of placing blame and taking responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and then also becoming more resourceful. I mean, if you want to go somewhere, you will find a way to get there.
Yeah, and you got to set those goals. You have to put in the work.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be realistic. Put in the work.
Yeah, it was Zig Ziglar, I think, said there's no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs.
Yeah. You have to take, the biggest thing, you have to take a risk. And you have to be willing to do it. You know, it's not always easy. I mean, when I took my TV job, Courtney, I'll tell you, I honestly did not believe that it went as far as it did. You know, I applied for it as a joke. Because I'm like, I am not going to get this job. Literally, I'm like, these people are looking for somebody with 5 years of experience. You know, they have a slew of breaking news and award-winning Emmys on their resume. They're not looking for somebody average like me. And then when it happened, I was like, oh, it's real. I mean, so, true. You know, you just got to take that risk.
You have to take that risk, and I think that so many of us short sell ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us as women do that to ourselves because of society's standards that women are only supposed to be in the kitchen. Women are only supposed to hold these low, below the totem pole roles. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. We live in modern times now. And who is it for you to tell me that I can't do something? You can't put a limitation on me at all. I can only put a limitation on myself.
Absolutely. And the gender stereotype is so intimidating too. I mean, there's been the research where you've put women and men in the room to take math tests, and the women typically score lower when they're placed, essentially thinking that they're competing with men because they tell themselves, I'm not good at math or whatever it is, because that's not how women think, or men think better like this. And it's really just, you're right, like the way that society has groomed us since we were young to believe this.
And, you know, that's why I'm doing this series. We need to change the dynamic around that. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not going anywhere anytime soon. Women need to be here. We're the ones that produce kids. So, I mean, you know, we need us here. So, Courtney, you know, March is Women's History Month, and every year they have a theme. This year's theme is Valiant Woman of the Vote. What does that mean to you?
So it means to me, just first off, is that I think that all of the incredible women who pushed so hard to get Amendment 19 passed, it's just amazing. And it's tough to really pinpoint one particular woman that did this, and this has been a struggle that we dealt with before 1920, and we currently still are dealing with it. So to me, it just encompasses everyone who's fighting for rights of women across the globe, really, but primarily in the United States. So it's tough to just give that one simple, this is what it means to me, but what I think it really means is that we all stand united and continue to move forward and make progress.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like you said, it's the bigger picture. And I think we as women, we need to continue to vote. We need to continue to fight for the things that are important to us as women, not just singularly. Absolutely. You know, there's so many different things that we struggle with already. You know, why put a limitation on something when we fought for this? We need to keep it going. We need to continue to get more things put in place to help us, to build us up. And, you know, that's another reason, like I said, I started this, was because I want people to see that just because you have a lot of adversity in front of you, there's opportunity in that.
Absolutely. And everything didn't just happen in 1920.
Right.
You know, I mean, there have been things there have been stages that continue. I mean, we couldn't even sit on juries until the 70s, I think. I mean, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just in 1920 this happened and I mean, it's a consistent pace and it's grassroots. And I think that being a female, or even being a male too, I mean, because there are females in your life. You work with them, you're married to them, you have children, you have sisters, a mom. You know, I think that it's so important because this impacts everything in our society, everything. And I think that we all owe it to ourselves just to take a 10 or 15 minute history lesson and really think what this means and how it impacts our society and how can we change it to do better.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything is a learning tool. We have to remember that. I read this book called The Game of Life by, what is it, Florence, what's her name? I can't think of her name at the moment, but the book said, man is not your friend, man is not your enemy, man is your teacher. And I said, well, man, if I haven't heard a real quote like this in a long time, I don't know what. But when I thought about that, it really gave me a perspective of life that I never would have thought of. You know, because we have our friends, right? We have people, our family members, friends. And, you know, we have people that may dislike us, but we learn from them. Whether we don't like you, you're a friend or not, we learn from each and every person. At least we should. Mm-hmm. That's how I look at life. Is I try to learn something new every day. Absolutely. I don't know. If I'm not learning something, it ain't no point in being here, right? You know? Right. So, Courtney, do you have a favorite person in history?
There are so many. So,
who's your favorite woman in history?
I would say my favorite woman would be Marie Curie. So she was a physicist, right? Yes. And so she was before women's rights, and she was born in Poland. And I am very big in the sciences. I think that a lot more women and, you know, young ladies should be involved in STEM research. But she really sticks out just because she was a trailblazer in her own right. She won 2 Nobel Peace Prizes, I think in 1903, maybe 1911. She did a lot of work with radiation. She was also front lines in the troops putting X-ray machines on ambulances in World War I. She's just a super, super interesting woman who just had a lot of grit about her. She did not come from formal education. She had kind of gone to this rogue school and then eventually ended up going, I think it was to France. She left Poland and went to France to get a little bit more formal education. But she was the first of her kind in her industry. So I would say that she's the one who sticks out right now. How about you?
Ooh, for me, see, I'm a history person, and I have a lot of people who I really admire. I would say for me, I did a book report in the 4th grade. I'm going to say 4th grade because maybe it was 3rd grade, on Sojourner Truth. And because I remember my mom took us to the library downtown. And I love that library. It's so cool. Because, I mean, it's expanded, but I always liked looking at the different sections of the library and the children's section. So I loved the work of Sojourner Truth. When I started learning more about Black history and, you know, these different activists for abolishing slavery and helping, you know, people reach freedom. And Sojourner Truth, I love what she did. You know, I loved a lot of her quotes. They remind me of my great grandma. She's one of my favorites because of her bravery, her courageousness, especially during that time where at any moment you could have been caught and just that'd be the end of you. But you stepped out on a leap of faith and you achieved it. And I think that's so big. I honor that so much.
It's huge. And to also think about all of the unnamed women who have been so courageous, who have really exhibited all of these attributes and just really taken that leap and gone out, and who, we don't know anything about, but I think it's really important to honor them as well.
Yeah, I think, everybody, especially women, we don't give ourselves enough credit, first of all. And then we also don't get enough credit for the things that we do. Kind of like you said about Marie Curie. Whether she had a formal education or not, she still broke boundaries, especially in the field of the sciences. And like you said, a lot of more women and girls should pursue something in STEM. My sister's brilliant in both math and science. Me, I got her beat on the English and history. So I was the language arts person. And I mean, my mom is, with her being a teacher, she's good. She's well-rounded. My mom is.
What does she teach?
She taught special ed preschoolers for the Cleveland Municipal School District. But my mom wanted to be an astronaut when she was growing up. But because she was the oldest out of all of her siblings, she had to raise her siblings. And so still she was able to help and teach them, get them ready for school, help them with their homework. So she still had that teaching ability. But me and her, we have deep conversations about space and stuff, and she loves Star Trek. Oh. So I'll go and be like, Trekkie. When I lived in Tulsa, I went to the Build-A-Bear workshop. I just walked in there one day just to see what it was all about. Sure enough, I came out with a bear. A Spock bear. And I gave it to my mom, and the feet on the bottom say live long and prosper.
That's great.
And then of course his hands are made like this. So
that's cute.
It was very cute. Very, very much so.
They say now, what's the big thing at Build-A-Bear is Yoda. I think that's the biggest thing Yoda. Now. Right. So that's blowing Facebook up.
The baby Yoda and the Groot. There was a debate on who was cuter, the Yoda or the Groot. I said, well, they're both cute, so I guess just sit them both on my counter and just, let them stay there. The debate is over. I like them both. You don't get much better than that. They're both cute, So, Courtney, you're part of, a small group of women who are captains, pilots. How can we break the stigma that only men or women are suitable for certain occupations?
Well, first, I think we have to believe in ourselves. I mean, that it has to start with us first. And also, you really can't blame men. I encounter so many women who place a lot of blame on the men, but we talk about, well, it's how we were raised. Well, they were raised with this in the same society that we were. So we can't really hold them at fault too. So I think taking responsibility that it's up to us to change it and go out there and whatever it is that you decide to do, and if it is in a male dominated industry, go out there and do it, but be the example, do it with grace and poise and be smart about it, be professional and set an example for other women out there and young ladies. Just be the example.
I hear that. When you were, first flying different planes and things like that, did you receive more criticism from men or women?
That's interesting because I would like to say that women support other women, but that is not always the case. And I was very surprised by that. But when you do find another female supporter, their support is fierce, which is amazing. So that probably hurt more when I was criticized by another woman. But just because it's a male-dominated industry, just by the sheer numbers, I was criticized more by men.
And that's interesting you say that because, one of my first guests for this series, we talked about that women we tend to be our own worst enemy. And it's sad because you would think we're both working hard to stay here. We both worked hard to get here, whether we both had different avenues to get here. It still took some work to make it into this industry. And so we're both here. We should support each other. That'd be the right thing to do. But instead, you want to tear me down. But how far is that going to get you? Because it'll be somebody else that comes in, does the same thing to you. So it's like the trickle down effect. You know, and that blows my mind a lot, that we don't support each other as much as we should.
Yeah, we see each other sometimes as competition. And but the reality of the situation is there's plenty of space for all of us.
Yes.
You know, we can all rise together instead of seeing each other as competition, because if we would just join forces, things could be so much better, and maybe not necessarily easy, but it would set it would set the example. It would set the bar higher, instead of we're feeding in sometimes to what the men say when they're like, oh, they're emotional, they're this, they're that. By attacking each other, we're just proving them right.
We proved the point.
Yeah. We're just validating what they say, like, we can't do, because we're too busy bickering and comparing ourselves to each other. I think it's important, if you don't want to join forces with someone, don't tear down their building just to make your building bigger. Just do you. Just do your thing and do you. Don't cause destruction in the process. Like, just do you if you don't want to combine forces with somebody else. It's so much better.
Yeah, and you know, another thing that I tell people is we have to be accountable. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And that it's easier to blame somebody else than it is to blame ourselves. And some people just love to be the center of attention, and it's all about them, and it always will be about them. And that's sad when you work as a team, no matter what, whether you have whether you're an entrepreneur or you have a company, you work for a company, it's still a collective effort. So why are you going to put a hole in the middle of the floor and everybody else, you know, is coming down this walkway and they're all falling in? You know, the productivity is going to go down, you know? So we got to change that dynamic, Courtney, because it's sad. And for me being a young person, I had to learn that the hard way, that it's not always the men that tear us down. It's sometimes the women.
Yes, and sometimes it's those who are closest to us too. Family, friends. You know, I mean, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
For sure. But I think an important thing, so we as women, or just as human beings, don't get off track and get too bogged down in someone's need for significance, is to keep in mind that everybody's doing the best that they can. They're doing the best that they know how to do, and it's just so important to lead by example.
Yeah.
Just don't feed into the drama. Don't knock somebody else's building down. Don't don't walk through and kick somebody's Legos. You know, just try and put some good every day into the world and strive to be better than you were the day before.
Well, thank you again, Courtney, for coming on and joining me out of your busy schedule. You're probably in and out everywhere from flying and doing all that good stuff. So, Courtney, how did you learn to cope in a male-dominant industry, especially being in, the airline industry where most pilots you see are men?
So in the airline industry, there are approximately 4% women. And in 2012, CNN had put out a statistic that in the airline industry for women worldwide, there were only, I believe, 450 female captains in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So a very, very small group. And that's all just for the airlines. And so the way that I learned how to deal with it at first was not very well, because I was not prepared for the way that men did not accept women. So there were often a lot of lewd sexual comments and jokes, and we all like to think that we sit here and say, oh, if someone ever said that to me, or if someone ever did this, I would, tell them exactly where to go. Or, we have this whole dialogue made up in our head what we would say. But sometimes when someone says something to you directly, that's really insulting. And especially if it's in the capacity, like with your job, and you are such a small minority without a lot of support, you find yourself almost deer in headlights, you know, and you don't know how to respond. And so for years, I would still act professional and just blow it off and just be like, oh, those are just guys. And many men would tell me too, well, you're in our world, our industry. If I walk into a crew room, which is like a place where pilots and flight attendants and stuff sort of meet up, like at the airport in between flights, or to rest. And if I walked in and maybe a pilot was talking about, say, a sexual encounter he had with someone, and my expectation would be, especially if a female walked in, to stop the story. And oftentimes that wasn't the case. They would just keep on rolling. And I would say, oh, hey, thinking maybe they didn't see me. And they were very clear about this is a man's world. And it has just been within the last 5 or 6 years where I really started to draw some firm boundaries. And I've seen a little bit of a shift in the men where there's more respect. And I'm not saying that this is all men, that this is across the board, but there are just several instances that I recall that were not okay. And as I said, it's been within the last 5 or 6 years that I've really, really come to terms with that and not beat myself up that in the past I didn't stick up for myself. Because a lot of people will say, oh, that's sexual harassment, or you should report this. And the fact is that that's easier said than done sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not always the case, especially like you said, you're a deer in headlights. I've had things said to me where in the back of my mind, after the fact, you think of, oh, I should have said this, I should have said that. But when it's actually said to you and you don't know what to say, especially if you're at work, you don't want to lose your job. You don't want to be stereotyped already. I mean, you're already stereotyped being in a predominantly male-driven industry, but do you want to be stereotyped more and prove the stereotype they have? No.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would also like to say that a lot of the flying public would also make comments. So I would either get, oh, wow, a woman pilot, although most of the times they thought that I was a flight attendant, which is fine too. But there have been several times where passengers who were getting on the plane, and you can go right to your seat or you can look to the left and see up in the flight deck. And typically there's a flight attendant standing at the flight deck door, so they can't really, get in the door as we're boarding. But I've had on numerous occasions passengers say, oh, there must be an empty kitchen somewhere, and yeah. And what do you say? And we could make a big scene and I could say, get off my airplane, because I have the right to do that. But what is the fallout going to be? You have to really pick your battles when you're a female in a male-dominated industry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's especially, busy and very, very high demand industry like the airline industry. I can only imagine. You probably dealt with a lot of no quote unquote spit thrown in your face a lot.
Yeah, I have. But that's made me tougher and stronger, and it also makes me empathize with many other people who face struggles.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. Courtney, I normally save this question for last, but I'm going to ask it now. What advice can you offer to women who may be in a male-dominant workplace or want to challenge the occupation stigma?
It's important to set boundaries and be firm with your boundaries and not be concerned with how you're going to be perceived by superiors or your peers. I think boundaries are really, really important. And if there's anything that I could say, it would be to establish those boundaries right off the bat. I wish I'd done that earlier in my career, but I see how powerful and beneficial they are.
Yeah, and boundaries, you have to set healthy ones for your sake too.
Absolutely.
And I feel like some people feel like that's the wrong thing to do. Like they should just keep doing and doing and doing. But it's like you're going to burn yourself out doing that. Instead of setting those boundaries and protecting yourself, your sanity, your dignity, set them.
Yeah, and you may have to work harder than your male counterparts because that's the world we live in right now. But it's important to make sure that they're healthy boundaries and also really adhere to whatever your position is and be a leader in whatever it is. And really just squash the stigma of women in the workplace. Just once again, be an example, but be a shining example.
Yes, shining example. So, Courtney, I know you have a nonprofit.
I do.
Runway. Can you tell us a little bit about it? If you have maybe some upcoming events or anything?
Sure. So it's Runway, which is Run plus Education. I had started it when I moved to Nicaragua in 2014. So I lived down there for a brief amount of time and combined my love of running with education and was like, I'm going to put these two together. And I helped create a scholarship program that funded education, all scholarships for adults to learn English and then place them in job opportunities in Nicaragua. So unfortunately, political unrest broke out in 2018. Nicaragua got really dicey down there, and I decided to return back to Cleveland full time. And I'd still been flying. I'd been commuting from Managua. And I have now partnered up to fight illiteracy with a local organization here called Seeds of Literacy.
Oh, wow.
And and so I still have committed myself to run a marathon on all 7 continents. So I have just a couple more continents left.
Wow.
And so I do that. And then I also do some public speaking that really is about owning your story and your past and finding a way to empower yourself and to empower others to go to the next level. And currently writing a book that'll be out next month. So all of this stuff is tied. So my future events, March 14th, I'm speaking in Philadelphia, and April 4th in Los Angeles, and a few more speaking events after that. But hopefully we can link up to my nonprofit website or my speaker website, and you guys can check it out.
Yeah. That sounds wonderful. Yeah, definitely. What's your website called, Courtney?
I've got 2. So there's runucate.com, which is runucate.com. And then the other one, which also will link to the nonprofit, is my name, Courtney Schoch, CourtneySchoch.com. And both of them can link to each other. But I'm doing a lot of things, a lot of projects, trying to put a lot of good back out into the world, trying to use some of my experience to inspire others, and primarily women. When I was in Nicaragua, there was a lot of femicide, a lot of just really horrific things that I saw, and I just really feel like I can make an impact, and in whatever way that looks like. So I'm still exploring. We're always growing. Just like you said earlier, every day you got to learn something new.